The person who answered the phone was that manager. Even from the other end of the line, it was clear that he was irritated. When I mentioned that I couldn't go to work due to my grandmother's funeral, the manager once again started saying something absurd.
Don't take time off for weddings and funerals. Where do you find such idiots? Come to the office right away.
Despite explaining that I was at a funeral, the manager demanding I come to the office might not have a heart. Thinking that I didn't want to work with someone indifferent to others' feelings anymore, I spoke to the manager on the other end of the phone. Well then, I quit. It may not be necessary for the company, but this funeral is the most important thing in my life. Thank you for everything. The manager was delighted to have gotten rid of someone he didn't like from the company, but the next day, he would regret his joy. When he was suddenly summoned to the president's office, the manager was angrily yelled at.
Where is he? Explain. But don't think it'll go smoothly depending on the content.
Huh?
It was the first time the manager realized he had done something irreparable. I'm David, a 42-year-old office worker. When I was in elementary school, my parents died in a traffic accident and my grandmother, Sarah, took me in and raised me. I became a truant, pessimistic about life after suddenly losing my parents. Because I couldn't calm down even at home, I started going out alone at night. Those who think life is over tend to gather together. Looking back now, maybe I wanted to fill the loneliness, but it's also true that I began to associate with bad guys more and more. I was among the nuisance group that just rode around the streets on motorcycles at night. Even family members might abandon someone who engages in delinquency like that, but whenever my grandmother realized I had gone out, she would always come after me. She would catch me trying to escape outside and give me a lecture. I was 15 at the time, but I couldn't compete with my grandmother in her late 60s.
Even if you do this, your parents won't come back. You're just running away from reality.
She would give me the same lecture every time she caught me. Even though I said I was tired of hearing it, my grandmother wouldn't listen, and she kept lecturing me many times over until I obediently said yes. It didn't matter how many people were with me. My grandmother, who would just calmly take me back without hesitation, seemed invincible. But my grandmother, who never resorted to excessive violence, seemed to combine kindness and fear. As I grew up, I began to see signs of decline in my grandmother. I was worried, but my grandmother never complained.
Don't worry about me. You just need to do what you have to do.
While saying that, my grandmother's back as she went to bring in the laundry is still unforgettable. I never knew my grandmother was such a small person. Even after I got a job at my uncle's company, I never thought about leaving my grandmother. I wanted to stay by her side and support her until the end, considering all the trouble I had caused her. Seeing me not wanting to leave, my grandmother said, "Get married and get out soon." When I was a child, she would say stay at home, and when I became an adult, she would say go out, thinking she was a crazy person, but it was thanks to her that I was able to grow up so much. 1 year after becoming bedridden, after assisting my grandmother, who was over 90 years old, I would go to work every day. I can keep pushing myself like this every day because my grandmother is here. However, it was also true that I was starting to feel reluctant to go to work. Recently, a new manager came from a certain foreign company. The manager's name is John, a person in his late 30s who used to work for a foreign company. He had an extremely overbearing personality and was stubborn, not considering other people's circumstances. I heard that competition is fierce in foreign companies, and it's common for the atmosphere within the company to be tense. Sure enough, it seems that the manager was heavily influenced by his experience in the foreign company when he joined our company.
Now that I'm in this company, sales have to more than double. Everyone should follow me desperately. I'll definitely reward those who work hard with a good salary.
He was young and more proactive than experienced people, with a lively demeanor. He was trying to liven up the scene by giving instructions, but there were times when things didn't go smoothly. At first, my colleagues watched with smiles, but as they encountered more and more selfish situations, they began to distance themselves from the manager.
It's no use doing what that manager says. It's better to stay away.
I was advised like that, but if I kept doing that, it wouldn't be productive. Even though I argued that it was necessary to approach him even if I didn't like him, my colleagues never nodded their heads. One day, I was instructed to place an order with a client, and although I did as I was told, within 5 minutes, the situation turned into cancel the order. If I had called immediately, it wouldn't have been a big deal, but the attitude of the manager at that time was particularly annoying.
Sure, I told you to place the order, but it's not right to leave all the decisions to me. Figure things out and act on your own.
As if I was at fault for silently following orders, the manager said in a voice loud enough for others to hear. Internally frustrated, I managed to laugh it off somehow. My colleagues sighed and said, as expected. It seemed that this younger manager was more troublesome than I had thought. To be honest, I even started thinking I didn't want to deal with him unless he was my boss. However, the manager found me the most convenient to use, and he started exploiting me for even trivial matters. Although I had my own work to do, he would still push unnecessary tasks onto me, knowing fully well. I tried to endure it as much as I could, but when I finally pleaded with him to consider my workload as well, the manager didn't take it seriously.
This company is too lenient. In the company I used to work for, every day was a battlefield, and people like you didn't last. You're different, so I'm using you specially. Be grateful.
He kept talking as if he was doing me a favor by favoring me. Even though he ignored other colleagues when they approached him, he knew I wouldn't refuse, so he took advantage of me as he pleased. And I've never even thought about going to a foreign company or wanting to work there. I wish he would stop justifying himself with irrelevant talk. The manager never noticed my efforts to be polite and considerate, nor did he stop himself from saying unnecessary things that would annoy people. Is this the mentality typical of foreign companies? After that, the manager took advantage of the fact that I didn't complain and started dumping impossible tasks on me. He would assign work just before the end of the day, or even call me in on my days off for his personal errands, treating me like a good-natured slave. But he's the promising employee everyone expects a lot from. I've been here for years, but even if I complain, without evidence, it would just be brushed aside. If our relationship were to turn sour, who knows what he might do? One day, while I was hoping I could either get promoted or transferred to another department, my grandmother's condition worsened. My grandmother had an enlarged heart, and there was a problem with its structure. Normally, the heart has valves to prevent fresh blood and old blood from mixing, but my grandmother's heart valve had changed shape with age and could no longer close completely. As a result, old blood mingled with the blood sent throughout her body, causing symptoms of fatigue. Even though surgery was an option, the prognosis was poor, and due to rage, the doctors didn't recommend it. Thinking that I might need to stay home worrying about my grandmother, she denied my thoughts, anticipating them.
I've lived long enough. You've grown up admirably. I don't want anything more. Don't quit your job because of me.
Even though she was the one suffering the most, my grandmother never asked me to stay by her side stubbornly. Yet, despite that, I still wanted to stay with her and take care of her. Then, suddenly, my phone rang. Although I had a bad feeling, when I looked at the screen, the manager's name was displayed. It was the worst possible timing, but when I answered the call, the manager didn't bother to check on my situation and unilaterally announced,
I'm going golfing now. I'll invite you since I'm feeling generous.
an unexpected invitation to go golfing. However, considering my grandmother's condition, I couldn't go immediately. I tried to politely decline without upsetting the manager, but he showed no signs of backing down. When I honestly told him that a family member was ill, unbelievable words came out of the manager's mouth.
Don't waste your life for someone who's on their last legs.
That single phrase was nothing short of an insult to my grandmother, who had taken care of me all these years. He was meddling in my family affairs without knowing anything about me or my grandmother. Feeling that he was someone I couldn't trust as a human being, I countered the manager. What do you know about our relationship? You're disliked even within the company because you casually say things like that, aren't you?
Are you serious about that? I've been taking care of you specially. You'll regret this.
The manager seemed to have more to say, but I forced myself to end the conversation by hanging up. There was no point in continuing to talk. I felt like I might regret acting on impulse, but there was no way I could endure such words. My grandmother wasn't just a guardian to me. She's my irreplaceable family member. Being disregarded by someone else was nothing but humiliating. In the end, my grandmother's condition worsened, and she had to be hospitalized to monitor her condition. I couldn't stand the frustration of being unable to do anything, but I continued to pray for my grandmother's return, trusting the hospital. However, my wish did not come true, and that day my grandmother passed away. Her irregular heartbeat was detected in the middle of the night, but the doctor didn't arrive in time. The nurse told me she had said, "I hate hospitals. I'll show you I can go home." I can only admire my grandmother, who fought bravely against illness until the very end. Losing my only family member besides me was beyond sad. I wanted to keep crying, but no one around me would wait. The day after my grandmother's casket was brought in, a funeral was hastily arranged. I served as the chief mourner and informed relatives of my grandmother's passing. Even though I wanted to be by my grandmother's side as much as possible. On the day of the funeral, which happened to be a work day, I was trying to contact the company to inform them that I would be absent for my grandmother's funeral. The one who answered the phone was that manager. I could tell from the other end of the line that he was irritated. When I told him I couldn't go to work because of my grandmother's funeral, the manager once again said something unpleasant.
Don't take time off for funerals or weddings. Hugh does that. Come to the office right away.
Despite explaining that it was during the funeral, the fact that the manager demanded I come to work showed his lack of empathy. I didn't want to work any longer with someone who was so indifferent to others' feelings, so I told him over the phone. Well then, I quit. This funeral may be unnecessary for the company, but it's the most important thing in my life. Thank you for everything. I no longer needed the company after making up my mind. I could endure being by my grandmother's side even for just a second longer. As I made that decision, I heard mocking laughter as if ridiculing my judgment.
Are you planning to quit? Are you out of your mind? I don't know how many years you've worked here, but you're really a disappointment. Even if you beg to come back, I won't care. Do your best at your age.
The manager then hung up after spewing sarcastic remarks. There was never any understanding between us until the very end. Perhaps that was just how things were meant to be. Now liberated from that, when I thought of spending time for my grandmother's sake, I was approached by my uncle, Bob, from behind.
You've taken good care of my mother all this time. I'm sure she was happy to live with you.
My uncle was my late mother's brother and my grandmother's son. He told me that if my grandmother hadn't taken me in, I would have been entrusted to him. At the time, he had just started his own company and couldn't afford to take care of me, so my grandmother took me in and raised me, not wanting to interfere with his work.
Who are you talking to? Of course, you've informed the company that you're taking time off, right?
My uncle seemed to be trying to find out if something had happened after hearing the previous phone call. As he had brought me into the company, I couldn't keep quiet about what had just happened. Wouldn't it be disrespectful not to repay my uncle's kindness for bringing me into the company? However, I couldn't stay silent, so I honestly explained the situation to him. I hadn't expected that my actions would expose the manager's misdeeds. At first, my uncle was listening calmly, but as soon as I told him I had quit, his face turned pale. And when I told him that the reason I quit was because a boss had demanded I come to the office on the day of the funeral, his pale face turned red in an instant.
Did that John really tell you to come to work on the day of the funeral?
My trembling uncle nodded in silence. There was no point in hiding it, and it wouldn't benefit me. I apologized to him for quitting. However, my uncle said, "Such apologies don't matter," and put his hands on my shoulders.
I'm sorry. It's because of my company that you had to go through such a hard time. I won't be able to face my mother even in the afterlife like this. Please wait a little longer. I'll come to question him tomorrow.
After saying that, the next day after the funeral, I was at home alone when my uncle called. While hoping it wasn't a big issue, I answered the call, and my uncle apologized loudly.
I just heard the whole story from John. I don't remember ever allowing something like this within the company.
My uncle recounted his conversation with the manager. The next morning, when he called the manager in for questioning, he walked into the president's office without sensing anything wrong.
What's this about, Bob? Did you call me in this early for good news?
Thinking he might be getting a promotion, the manager tried to curry favor with my uncle as soon as he entered the room, but my uncle was irritated by his attitude and got angry. When he asked why I wasn't at the company, the flustered manager spilled everything.
I heard about the funeral over the phone, but there seems to be a misunderstanding. He repeatedly said he needed time off for the funeral.
However, the manager didn't seem remorseful and tried to justify his actions by saying I had acted on my own. Not realizing the relationship between me and my uncle, the manager shamelessly lied.
He's always had a habit of lying. I've been fooled many times too. He even asked me to take him golfing, but when I invited him, he said he couldn't come. And about the funeral, that's a lie too. He always tried to take time off on important days like that.
The uncle couldn't tolerate this statement any longer, so he informed the manager that he was also present at the funeral. When the manager learned the truth, he froze and didn't move a muscle. Perhaps at that moment, he realized the relationship between us. And because he understood in his head that everything he had said was a lie, he froze. Even though the manager was confident in his words, he probably didn't know how to justify himself. Finally, the uncle, who had made up his mind, declared his determination to the manager.
What you did was outrageous. Not only that, but you also mistreated a subordinate and a relative of mine. I can forgive you. We will discuss your disciplinary action at the internal meeting from now on.
He said that and told him to leave the president's office, but the manager didn't seem to agree and begged for mercy. He clung to Bob's legs and cried out, "Have mercy, have mercy." It was quite a scene. After that, with the help of other employees, he was taken outside, and Bob immediately called me.
I'm sorry, but can you come back again? Our company still lacks manpower, and such people are coming in frequently. There may be no end to the problems, but I want to expand our business.
Bob earnestly begged me over the phone to come back. Thanks to him, I was able to live with my grandmother while working. At my current age, it would be tough to start working at another company from scratch. Now that my grandmother is gone, I wanted to do my best at my familiar job. After that, the manager was disciplined and expelled from the company. As we listened to what the manager had done within the company, it became apparent that he had often imposed unreasonable demands on others, not just on me. It was even worse for a beautiful female employee in the accounting department who was almost called in late at night. He behaved as he pleased not only within the company but also outside. He used his position to place orders with subcontractors at ridiculously high prices and threatened not to place orders again if they dared to resist. My uncle, who was in charge of supervision, was at a loss for what to do with a situation that seemed endless. Afterward, the company decided to demand compensation from the former manager for seriously damaging trust. The amount of damage was reported to be astronomical, and it would probably be an amount that couldn't be paid even if he worked for a lifetime.
This is unheard of. It can be said that this company has been built on trust so far. We cannot forgive him for tarnishing it.
Although he was an excellent talent, Bob seemed to reflect on the fact that an unreasonable person could only lead to the collapse of social order. After returning to the company, I redirected the passion I had for my grandmother towards my work. Thanks to that, everything went smoothly, and I enjoyed it. Even when overtime was necessary, I didn't hesitate to do it. As our performance improved, I was offered a promotion by Bob. He even told me that he wanted me to succeed him as a successor. Ever since I lost my grandmother, I was afraid I might fall into despair again, but it seems that was unnecessary worry. Instead of drowning in sorrow, I want to keep myself busy. Perhaps my grandmother wished for that. Maybe she worried about what would happen after she was gone and wanted to steer me towards work. If that's the case, I can't thank my grandmother enough. Though it's too late for repaying her kindness, I had been thinking if I could contribute to society through my work. And then, I fell in love and got married to a new female employee who joined the company. She was too good for me, and she could do anything around the house. Thanks to her, I could concentrate more on my work, and the company expanded its scale. Bob also seemed satisfied with my achievements. Bob invited me, "Why don't we visit the grave?"
I'll show her the impressive grandchild. That's the best thing. And shouldn't we report about her great-grandchild too?
Yes, my wife was carrying my child. Although I was worried because of her advanced age, she insisted on having a child, so I made up my mind too. No matter what happens, I'll protect my baby, just like my grandmother did for me. There's still a lot to do, and it's tough, but I feel like there are more people supporting me than before. From now on, I want to support people, not just being supported. Thinking like my gentle and reliable grandmother, I headed towards her grave. At the front door, I handed an envelope to my mill, saying it was some spending money. She refused, saying she didn't need money, but I insisted, telling her to buy something for the kids. The letter enclosed expressed my gratitude for her care over the years and my apology for not being able to protect the family. That was the last time I saw my mill and my wife.
We never really had good chemistry, did we? You've also had a hard time living with your in-laws. It must have been suffocating for you as a man. However, I do appreciate you giving my parents peace of mind.
My wife said that in a calm tone. I couldn't feel any gratitude or consolation in her words or expression. I am Michael Carter, 48 years old. I'm a manager at a pharmaceutical company. My only daughter, Emily, is a college student studying abroad in France. So it was just my wife and I living together. Her words went on.
Do we really need to keep trying? Life's entering its second half. It's okay to let go of things we've done reluctantly and live out the dreams we couldn't achieve before. Life is once, after all. So I'm not going to Vietnam. An overseas transfer to a developing country. You must be joking. At your age, a 5-year stint in Vietnam sounds like a demotion, doesn't it? It's embarrassing, really. I'm fed up with our current life, and you want me to live even more inconveniently? The fact that you have to follow personnel decisions doesn't change, whether I'm here or not. You should go alone and fulfill your employee duties, but I can't. Just because I'm your wife doesn't mean I have to blindly follow your demotion, right?
With that, she left the room. She probably wants to enjoy the rest of her life as she pleases. Honestly, I saw this coming. But knowing it didn't stop the words from hurting. I couldn't help but feel the pain of a bad premonition turning into reality. I married Linda 23 years ago. We went to different universities but met in a common club. Linda was proactive, cheerful, and stood out. We never met alone during college, but she reached out after I started working, and we began dating. I think she liked where I got a job. It's a well-known, top-tier company with a long history in the pharmaceutical industry. In addition to pharmaceuticals, it also deals with health foods and cosmetics. The company is expanding sales in populous Southeast Asia, developing skincare products suited to the climate, and is now preparing for local sales. We have been selling pharmaceuticals in Vietnam and the Philippines for a while, and sending employees there is not a new strategy. It's about exploring new markets and training local staff, not a demotion. However, Linda, who prefers a luxurious lifestyle, probably hoped for Europe. During our 23-year marriage, we've been abroad 3 times. Our honeymoon was in Hawaii, and the other 2 trips were to France and Italy. All of them were her choices. Linda also went on women-only trips with her college friends. They always went to Europe. She bought luxury goods at duty-free shops abroad and brought back cosmetics for me and our daughter.
Men should wear cologne, too.
I was pressured into using scents I didn't like. When Linda was away, her mother, Sarah, would come over to cook. Originally, This house was built in Linda's parents' backyard as a home for the newlyweds. Linda's travels were not only abroad, but sometimes on weekends, so Sarah often took care of things in her absence. Her cooking might not be fancy, but it's the epitome of American home cooking, and both my daughter, Emily, and I always enjoyed it. It tasted better than Linda's cooking, and I could feel her genuine desire to serve delicious food. On the other hand, Linda dislikes cooking. Knowing this, Sarah frequently brings over dishes. While we live separately, part of me thinks living with she would be easier, considering her efforts. But my wife dislikes that idea. She can't stand her mother's nagging. To me, her complaints seem justified, but to Linda, they're nothing but annoying scoldings. What Linda really wants is not a caring mother, but a housekeeper who silently manages all the household chores. Between the times we finish Sarah's dishes and wait for the next, my wife's cooking makes an appearance as a stopgap. Curry rice, stew, pasta, or Chinese food. In winter, she cooks French onion soup. On those days, the trash bin tells a different story. It overflows with pre-cut vegetables for curry, pasta sauce, ingredients for soup, all in their packaging. My wife never bothered to align trash disposal with the pickup schedule. I try to understand, given my own busy weekdays. But Linda is a homemaker. She has never worked a day in her life. Engrossed in her hobbies like theater and tennis since her younger days, she neglects the housework. Every time, Sarah ends up tidying up the house. I believe she carried our daughter, Emily, on her back much more often than Linda did. My Phil once suggested having another child. He wants a grandson.
No more kids, pregnancy, and raising one was enough.
Linda would frown and say that each time. I've told her not to say such things in front of Emily. What child would be happy to see their mother visibly fed up with parenting? Emily wasn't a gloomy child, perhaps taking after her mother's lively nature, but she seemed somewhat indifferent towards people. Whether that's her true character or the result of her mother's indifferent parenting, I can't tell. But if we were to have only one child, I wish she'd engage more deeply with her. Seeing my wife plan her schedule as soon as my business trips were confirmed made me wonder what our marriage was all about. Even though both are mothers to an only daughter, my wife and Mill are worlds apart. I'm the middle child of 3 siblings, with an older brother and a younger sister. In the countryside, expectations for the eldest son were high, and my brother was cherished, while I, 2 years younger, wore his hand-me-downs. My sister, being the youngest, must have been especially adored. I might have felt excluded, even if our parents didn't realize it. That's why I thought when I got married, I would love our children with all my heart. I always wanted to create a home where the family could feel happiness at all times. I worked hard to ensure we had no financial worries and helped with household chores and child rearing as much as I could. But living with a wife who didn't prioritize home life only increased my burdens. Maybe for Linda, marriage and childbirth were just things she thought she'd try once. My Phil passed away around the time Emily started elementary school. As my Mill no longer needed to care for her husband, Linda relied on her mother even more than before, making her even freer. It was my daughter, rather than my wife, who was worried about my trip to Vietnam. Emily, my daughter, spent a month in Paris on a homestay during her first year of high school. It sparked her interest in France, and so she transferred to a university in France starting from her junior year of college. She often sends pictures and updates from there via WhatsApp and writes detailed messages about the struggles of living abroad. Mark, don't tell mom. The only things I'm grateful for in my marriage to Linda are the love from my in-laws and having my daughter. By this time, Linda was probably as tired of married life as a child gets tired of playing house. On the morning of my departure, I carried my packed suitcase downstairs alone. I left the signed divorce papers on the bedroom sideboard. A sticky note was attached to it beforehand, and it read, "Please sign this before you go." She planned to tell Emily and Sarah after I had left. I didn't want to cause a stir before leaving, so I complied.
Why leave now, when there's really no need to go out at a time like this?
Linda had been away on a trip with her classmates since the day before. She claimed she couldn't cancel the reservation made well in advance because it would be unfair to her friends. I no longer cared about such things. Sarah, waiting to see me off at the front door, seemed even smaller. "Please take good care of Linda and look after your health."
Take care of yourself too. Drink enough water and watch your meals.
"Please stay healthy. I'll rely on you when Emily comes back."
Take care.
I thanked her sincerely and got into the waiting taxi. I gave Sarah an envelope of money, calling it pocket money. She refused to accept it, but I insisted she use it to buy something Emily likes. The envelope also contained a letter of thanks for her care over the years and an apology for not being able to keep the family together. I think Emily had a hunch about it. Seeing Emily always looking outside, away from home, made me wonder if that's why she left, to avoid facing her anxieties. That was the last time I saw Sarah and Linda. I had no enthusiasm left to start a new life in a foreign country. Leaving my homeland behind, I felt no nostalgia, only the heavy pain of a broken home as I left JFK. Time passed, and I returned to the U.S. Heading to one of the top hotels in New York, the area was bustling due to the weekend. That day, a Thanksgiving party was being held to celebrate the 100th anniversary of my company. It was a buffet party for employees and their families. I went with Lyin. She is my new wife, whom I met during my 5 years living in Vietnam. I was drawn to her unobtrusive yet attentive demeanor. After 2 years of dating, we decided to marry. Knowing we would return to USA, she learned English in preparation for our life here. Many in Vietnam speak French due to colonial history. Lyin, inheriting her grandfather's accent, relearned and taught French at a language school. There, she interacted with American teachers and students, which was how we met. She seems to have a knack for languages. She's even better at French than me. That day, she wore a traditional Vietnamese aita, a slim-fitting dress. Perhaps because the slim-fitting traditional attire wouldn't suit otherwise, it seemed that overweight women were rarely seen in Vietnam. Although she isn't very tall, Lyin looks slender and elegant, her hair tied up with decorative hairpins and earrings that enhanced her appearance. After descending from the elevator, we walked into the venue together. Her aita was a deep wine color with large flower embroidery. It was not flashy, but elegant, making me feel proud. Life in Vietnam turned out to be more comfortable than I expected. The climate suited me as I disliked the cold, and our apartment was a serviced residence. It was fully furnished and included thrice weekly cleaning and laundry services. We could watch American TV shows and had access to a pool and gym. Living without household chores in a slightly better environment made me think Linda would have liked it had she come. Many Americans lived in my apartment complex. As I began learning Vietnamese, not only did I become acquainted with more American people, but I also started to increase my circle of Vietnamese acquaintances, 1 or 2 at a time. Everyone was kind and friendly, with no airs about them. Surprisingly, American products were available locally, so living there was easy. Our company needed to make inroads here. Getting used to life brought new goals and more comfort. That winter, Emily came from France during her break.
worried about Grandma, so I need to go home to the US. But maybe it's better not to see Mom. I was more concerned about whether you could manage. Dad?
Linda grew up and lived in her hometown, but Emily, having experienced living abroad from a young age, seemed to have more specific concerns. Even when she went to Paris for a language course, it was fun for her at first due to its novelty, but after 2 weeks, the frustration of not being able to communicate and feelings of inferiority overwhelmed her. She got sick of the same food every day and hit a cultural wall. Having experienced that, her study in France after that was much more relaxed, and being better at French made it comfortable. She seemed to enjoy it a lot.
So, Dad, you shouldn't get upset thinking, why is Vietnam like this? Accept everything as a novelty, thinking, so this is normal here. Getting stressed because it's not like the US won't solve anything. It just makes it harder for you.
Seeing Emily giving advice like a counselor, I realized how much she had grown up. Still, the divorce during her absence felt like deceiving my daughter, and I felt guilty. Something must have been wrong or lacking. I feel bad for you.
It's okay.
After the meal, we made sweet Vietnamese coffee and sat down together.
If you can't be happy together, there's no point forcing it. No matter how hard you try, some people just don't mesh. In France, I initially stayed with American people because it was comforting. You can tell what someone is like because the language is the same, right? But gradually, I started feeling, maybe this person and I don't click. Conversely, I found that even with foreigners, there are those with whom I strangely get along. Even though our languages and upbringings are different, and our values and everything else should be too, it's enjoyable to be with them. You just naturally get along with some people without effort. I think it's about fate or compatibility. Even if you're family, saying you should get along unconditionally doesn't change the fate or compatibility that exists. I've always struggled with Mom trying to control everything. I wanted to learn swimming, but she forced me into piano lessons because I'm a girl, and then got angry at me for lacking enthusiasm. I hated practicing in front of her, which made me dislike it even more. She also tried to dress me in her preferred style and got mad when I cut my hair short. Yet, when it was time to change clothes for the season, she couldn't even remember where my uniform was, often leaving it at the cleaners. It felt like everything at home was always half done and chaotic. I might not be supposed to say this, but living with her made me determined not to be such a mother.
That's tough, Emily.
But Grandma was always there to help. Mom often scolded her for spoiling me, but I think Mom was really the one depending on her.
To think she can view adults so calmly at just barely 20 years old. The reality was far from the happy family life I had envisioned. Listening to her made me reflect deeply. Emily never had loud clashes with her mother. It was mostly Linda unilaterally attacking her with words. When my mill or I intervened, it only made Linda more heated up. And the more heated up her mother got, the more silent Emily became. I wonder how much she had to swallow her words and feelings, enduring silently.
I think bad conversations should be avoided.
Bad conversations.
Yay, like those that only cause arguments or escalate emotions. It's better not to have them. As my French improved, my social circle widened, but that was to have good relationships, not to outtalk others. Language is there to understand others. Just because we speak the same language doesn't mean we should say everything. Dad, you must have been holding back, too.
Being consoled by my daughter, who had flown from France, I felt a lack of face as a father. But it also felt like seeing the fruits of my labor.